Coach Carta-Samuels, the CEO of Locked In Athlete. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Appreciate it, man. Happy to be here. Go ahead and let's give the people what they're looking for, huh?
Yes, sir. So Coach Carta-Samuels, he started off his playing career at Wyoming and then had a little bit of a different journey when he went to JUCO and then he ended up at Vanderbilt. So, Coach, can you just start off by sharing with the audience a little bit about your career and about how you got started, in coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. Super long career. Come from a family of three Division I athletes, myself, my brother, and my sister. And I was the lead one, so I was the first one. And as I got up there, the University of Wyoming had a ton of success, man. So as an 18-year-old true freshman, was Mountain West Conference Freshman Player of the Year, New Mexico Bowl Game MVP. We beat Derek Carr and Ryan Matthews from Fresno State. Was the offensive player of the week 4 times in the conference. So I say that all to say that my freshman year of college was kind of a Cinderella story. Like it was a wild ride, and to be a true freshman in college football doing that, like it's pretty unheard of. And the reason that I say it that way is because what happens after you have one of those unheard of rides is usually like that slump or that step back or whatever. And so we went into our sophomore year and just the culture of our organization was kind of eroding. We lost a lot of our players and we had a really tough season. And at the end of that season, like I'm somebody who you guys will quickly learn is I could never have ceilings over my head at all. And I just felt that in the environment that I was in, I was a 3.8 student. I was a captain of the football team as a 19-year-old. Like I had, thrown for over 5,000 yards in college already and done all these things. And I really wanted to push my level of play. And so I elected to transfer and I went into the head coach. And I understand it now after coaching in college football for over 7 years. Like he blocked my release and he didn't want me to be able to go to any other college and told me exactly that as well. And the reason was not malicious. The reason was because like it doesn't look good to have your captain and starting quarterback leaving your program. So I understand that, but it sent me on a wild whirlwind, and that was a very difficult time in my life. I had to move back home and enrolled in a junior college. I couldn't even play football because I had already used 2 years of eligibility, and I didn't want to waste anything further. So in one spring semester, I took 30 hours, graduated with an AA degree, was able to get accepted into Vanderbilt University. James Franklin had just been hired, the head coach at Penn State, had just been hired there. We got in touch. He watched my tape. He was super excited to have me. Even then, I was still ineligible for that fall due to transfer. So I had to be on the scout team and play running back and wide receiver. But it was a really, really cool experience to be with the guys and learn my defense like that. And then my junior year, I was the backup to Jordan Rodgers, Aaron's younger brother. We were a top 25 team in America. We finished 9-3. And then going into my senior year as the captain and starting quarterback, we did the same thing, finished 9-3, and we're nationally ranked. And then to finish off my career as a captain at Vanderbilt after all of that and do it in the most successful run in the history of that program, like it was just a hell of a ride. And there's a lot of experiences that happen there and a lot of adversity and darkness and things that I've faced over the course of my career. And that my brother candidly has as one of the top quarterbacks in his class in the country coming out of high school, going to Washington, that ultimately birthed the purpose. And that purpose is probably why you found me, which is coaching. And obviously we'll probably get into the coaching career, but like all of those experiences and how much I deeply care about the people around me, always have, just as a leader of these organizations, like really just shaped me kind of seeing things in a much different light than a lot of people see them. And that's what's birthed this wild passion and purpose for what it is I do.
Yeah, and going off what you were talking about with the ups and the downs, it's never about as you're going through it, you really can't think about the outcome. It's always about the process. And I think I was reading something about your Locked In Athlete website, and something on your website resonated with me and made me think about that. So as you kind of transition into your coaching career, we talked a little bit before this about your experience as like the director of culture with the University of Missouri. So
Yeah.
can you talk about that transition and how that role kind of helped shape your outlook on things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, basically this all started because my grandfather is one of the top psychologists in all of California, and he worked with a bunch of professional athletes in the Bay Area. And obviously he worked with his with his grandson too. So as he would talk to me about just reframing things mentally and talk to me about the things that I was going through emotionally, it made me aware of things that a lot of people don't really often think about. And so then after my trauma and things that I went through my collegiate career of, just that transfer process of feeling like, 50,000 people love you in a city, in a school, and then you leave them and you realize like 49,500 of them didn't care at all. Like you are just a number. It kind of just, I grew an affinity for what my guys are going through in my locker room. And so as I got into coaching, like, again, it's the psychology track. Is I got in really to get my master's in higher education. So I got my master's degree in educational and counseling psychology. And that's when I got really close with Drew Lock. That's when I started recruiting Kelly Bryant. That's when I started getting into the culture at Missouri and feeling all of those guys. And ultimately, like, just realized that a lot of us as athletes have been asked to wear the mask. And that mask is like, you're tough, you're this, you're that. And it's like, yes, like that is who we need to be, but that's earned, and that's earned internally. And that's what James Franklin and Chris Peterson, who's my brother's coach at Washington, the way that they approach their development philosophy is inside out coaching. It's coach the human being, and then everything else will manifest on the field. Like if the soul of the human is right, they'll be the best football player that they can be. And unfortunately, like most of the country does not subscribe to that model. They believe in coaching the athlete extremely difficultly and treating him, like a number, not a name, right? And what you have is you have Generation Z, like this generation of athlete that's born after the year 2000, that has the same level of anxiety on average as a 1950 psychiatric patient. And ultimately, they're in social contact at all times, but with their cell phones, but usually alone, which doesn't feel right to them. And so, in that, basically, all the curriculum and all the things that I was studying from a mental perspective, all the exercises that I was assembling, I knew that I had a calling in my life, and that was to ultimately address like this side of football. Because if kids get this from the time they're 13 to 17 and they develop the things that we do with them prior to getting to college, you'll see them laugh at the shit that happens to them when they get to college. Whereas if you were like me and you haven't done that deep work, and then you show up to college and then you have James Franklin telling you how you need to act, and fans telling you who you're supposed to be, and people telling you what you are, you're flying and floating with everything that's said about you. And that was my experience. That's the experience of most of my peers that have played at the highest levels of college football. And so really just that's my coaching mission, was to make an impact on collegiate football, which obviously I did, but to come back down to youth now and catch them at 13 to 17 years old and really have them establish their own identity and a basic level of self-awareness that, when there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm. Like that is the philosophy. It's like to know who we are so much that we're not affected by the things that the common man is.
Yeah. And it's all about starting with the why and having a strong belief in yourself. And I think from what you just said, that's the epitome of having a strong why. So going into your locked in athlete career. So how is all of that over your playing career, your coaching career? How has that helped you ultimately help these 13 to 17-year-old student athletes?
Yeah, it's incredible, man. It's that I have a plan, and that plan started young for me, and how I have done this has been really, really cool. Where um, I was always into mental health. I was always into psychology. That was always something that I loved. And then I would show my friends my phone and like go, dude, isn't this cool? And they would go like, they would be disinterested, like they wouldn't really care. And so at that time, I realized that, like, okay, okay, football is the way that I'm going to open up those doors. So everybody can watch me throw a football and know I throw a football better than most anybody in the United States of America. My brother does the same. I'm talking all trainers, I'm talking all players, and I'm talking half the NFL. They can see it. So when you can see that, and then we are backed up by our passion and our investment in the holistic development model of the brain and the heart, like what you're having is you're having a ton of kids that are very, very interested in what we're doing. And then you bring them into that community because they want to throw better. And then they end up throwing better and getting this other side of both. And then you have this mental, spiritual, and physical integration that happens, which is flow state. And flow state is operating out of our subconscious. And that's ultimately the way that we teach, is the way that Bruce Lee taught fighting. And it's to be out of our mind. And so now we have this community of like-minded individuals that have all tasted, felt this, and it's hard work. Like it is difficult work. I'm taking you into the depths and pits of it. Like we can't just go, hey, so yeah, who are you? You know, I mean, this is real shit. It's what's the hardest thing you've ever had to overcome? What'd you learn from it? What are your greatest fears? Like, what are the things that you're afraid of? Like, why? Why are you afraid of them? Like, what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? You know, for me, like my greatest weakness and something that I've run away from my whole life is the fact that I like feel very insecure. Like I really care about what other people think of me a lot. And then it's like, well, is there any correlation between the fact that you were a two-time captain at two major Division I universities and did all of this in coaching before the age of 28? It's like, no, my insecurity is a high emotional propensity. And so I can feel others really well. So I'm able to lead others extremely well. And so like, I never realized at that time that like my greatest weakness was my greatest strength. You know, it's the same thing. And so you're doing that work with these kids. And once you do that, like it's just an established level of trust inside the walls of the community. And I tell every family, like, there's golden gates here, dude. And I'm the person that controls those gates. And I'm not letting people behind the gates that don't subscribe to this type of philosophy. And so once you're behind the gates, it's just immediately felt, it's immediately understood, and it's a safe space. And like, that's what I wish that I had as a player. That's what I know all these dudes that are playing up on Saturdays and Sundays wish they had as players. And that's kind of the philosophy behind how we go about doing this.
Yeah. And you talked about having that community, and especially for the high school age group, having like-minded people, but also a leader like yourself that can show these student athletes the ropes and how to actually do this. That's invaluable. And going back to like my career when I was a player, so I was not nearly at your level. I played Division III football, but it's, even though it's at a smaller level, it's the same thing. Like having a role model is invaluable. So maybe who are some of your role models? I know you talked about your grandfather a little bit.
Yeah, my grandfather for sure. James Franklin is definitely right there. The reason that I always say with Franklin is I was a high achiever before I met him. And when I met him, he showed me a higher version of myself and held me to that standard. And then I became that. So, like, just having that influence over my life was something that changed the direction of my life. So, him for sure. Robin Williams, the late Robin Williams, his care and affinity for people, and his love and desire to make humanity a better place. Bruce Lee, as I said, like he's flow science. Like when you talk about what he did for fighting, like fighting had always been just Muay Thai or just jujitsu or just, and he created karate. And karate essentially was like, dude, if I can only do one and I get into a fight, I'm in trouble. Like it would have to be with a guy who has the same style. And what he said is like, it's all styles. It's everything. It's reaction to what's going on around you. So that was a big one. And then I'd say the last one is Tony Robbins, probably. Just somebody who has inspired me to grow closer with myself. And in that, really find what God's purpose is for me. And then once I find what God's purpose is for me, ultimately helping me design how I'm bringing that to the world. And so those would be, that would be the cabinet, man. That would be the group right there.
Okay. Cool. And then on your website, this just made me think about it. You talk about constantly evolving, and recognizing changes as they happen. So I feel like from what we talked about with your career, you can probably elaborate on that with your experiences. So can you just talk about that? And I know we spoke a little bit, but maybe
for
more
sure.
so.
Yeah, for sure. I just think that in life, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. Like I really believe that. I think that you should always be pushing yourself to optimize. Now, you need to be gentle with yourself as you do it, but you should always be evolving. You should always be growing. I think that some of the saddest people in this world are the people who at one point had something go wrong and now they're just kind of comfortable with where they are, and it's not even conscious. Like they're not choosing deliberately to stay there, they're just there. And to me, a constant state of evolution is a constant state of growth. Sometimes that growth may feel like you're going backwards, sometimes it may feel like you're going forwards, but I think in all of our lives, like the ultimate goal is just to become the best human being that we can. Like, I really believe that. And the best human being that we can be is ultimately going to be able to impact others the best way that we can. And I think the secret to living is giving. So just staying in a constant state of evolution in all areas of your life. Something that I like to share with our guys is we're living in a physical, mental, and spiritual world at the same time. Most people are so hyperly obsessed about their physical looking great and having money and all of those things, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just one out of three planes. Like, what are you doing to protect your mental health? Some of that is the habits that you're choosing. Some of that is the friends that you have around you. Some of that is those decisions that you're making spiritually. Like, how I define spirituality is your relationship with yourself. Like, everybody can bring religion into it, and like religion is a part of it. I'm not neglecting religion is extremely important, but from a spiritual standpoint, like spirituality is, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? And if you do know who you are, like, and you've done that work, then are you aligning your life with who that person is? And so just the cross-pollination of physical, mental, and spiritual, and staying in a constant state of evolution, and then really letting go and saying, like, I'm going to trust the process with my life. Like you had said, like I'm going to surrender to the process. And I would say, just to share, like with me, it's, I was one of the top 30 coaches under 30 in America by 247 in ESPN for 3 years in a row, from 25 to 26 to 27 years old. And I was making six figures when I left the SEC. Like, who does that? Who does that? Well, who does that is somebody who subscribes to the question that you just asked me, which is, I didn't feel that I was able to grow as a collegiate football coach in one little environment where you're there for 17, 18 hours a day with guys who you can't choose who you work with. These are your best friends, and they have to be your best friend. And like, my mind just works too expansively. Like I couldn't stay in that situation. And so I had to leave. And the reason that I brought that up was because people typically say it in a way that's like, wow, Austyn, like that's incredible that you did that. And I'm like, I didn't really have a choice. Like I didn't want to leave all of that behind. Like I wanted to be a head coach in college football, but I was really worried about who I might become if I stayed there for another decade and didn't follow my heart and follow what I thought was right for me. And so to your point, just staying in a constant state of evolution, I think is everything. And I think for these kids, everything we're living in a very immediate gratification society. So like now everything is supposed to happen fast. You know, Amazon orders on the internet get to your house in a day. Like you can go heat up something in the microwave for 45 seconds and you have a meal. You know, like everything is so quick these days that we're losing a lot of the nature that kids have to just say, I don't know what I'm going to be. I just know that I'm going to work my ass off for it and see where it takes me. Yeah. And that's kind of a dying breed. And so like within the gates of my community and what we do, that is the norm. And if you do anything less than that, you're not a part of it because you don't subscribe to this constantly evolving world that we live in. And ultimately, as I say to everybody, is like, I'm going to lead from the front. So I think the reason that a lot of people in this industry don't like me or are threatened by me is because I do that. I think a lot of them don't do that. I think a lot of them say what they think, but they don't live what they're saying.
Right.
And I live what I say. And I think that that's why Locked In Athlete is going to be a very special thing for a lot of years to come, because this is not just quarterbacks.
Yeah.
This is going to, that's why I said athlete at the beginning of this. Everybody knows us as quarterbacks. It's going quarterbacks, that will be executed and that will be in place. Then it will be athletes and that will be in place. And then it will be humanity at large. So there's a much bigger plan behind this. And I think you can probably feel that in the way that I'm saying it.
Definitely. Yeah. And you talked about being able to work at something without seeing the result right away. And for me, that resonates a lot because when I was in college, so crazy story, the day I graduated high school, I hurt my knee it was an all-star local charity game. And to make a long story short, I ended up missing both my freshman and sophomore season.
Wow.
So just continually working, and that kind of served as a catalyst for when I graduated, because that's when I started this company. And this whole thing has been a process in and of itself. And, you know, just hearing what you have to say definitely resonated. So thanks for that.
Absolutely, man. No, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate what you're doing too. I mean, just in terms of enriching the coaching community and young, fresh perspective, just different voices. And, you know, you said you played at the Division III level. Like it doesn't matter, dude. You've been in it and you felt it and you've seen it and you know what that's like. And I think that in so many ways, like some of the most fulfilled players that I coach are Division II and Division III quarterbacks, because like it's staying out of the matrix of the money world and all of these things that make everything so big business that it's kind of hamstringing some of their experiences at the Division I level. So I think there's a purity to exactly where you were too that needs to continue to be shed too, man. So I appreciate the time for sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Coach, and best of luck. Any last words you have with the audience here?
Absolutely not, man. Besides that, we're our staff and our community is here and open. So if what I've said resonates with you, reach out. It may take a little bit of time, but reach out. And ultimately, if you feel me and what I'm saying, then you need to communicate with me and get involved with what we're doing, because this is something that will change athletics and youth mental development as it pertains to sports. And so I'm obviously extremely passionate about it. And I'd love to have any like-minded individuals come and join and be a part of our community.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Coach.
Absolutely, brother. Appreciate you.
You too.